Hello, Bryan.
Hi, Bob. How are things?
It's good not to see you again. Everything is just fine. I've been just kind of treading water this summer, waiting for you to reappear, so we could talk again about the state of sports. And I know that you're very anxious to talk about the death of the sports columnist. Is that because you want sports columnists to die? Or?
No, I mean, I think that would be a very self-destructive impulse, don't you? As an infrequent sports columnist myself. I want to talk about it because I read this piece in the Columbia Journalism Review that says that that the sports columnist, the local newspaper sports columnist, just to be specific, is on his way out the door for various reasons. And having spent some time as a local newspaper sports columnist yourself, I was wondering, what do you think? Should we get rid of them? Are they still relevant in this here 21st century?
I think we need them more than ever. I really do. I think that the sports columnist, the man or woman who actually goes to an event and talks to people, comes back and tells us what they've found out with attitude, is kind of an interesting balance to the basic blogger. Now we're back into bad territory again. The basic blogger who is sitting in a cork-lined room like Proust, having ideas about why Swan is in a batting slump. But I think that part of the problem is that we've totally lost faith with the sports columnists since 1998, when they blew the only really big story of our time, which was steroids.
Right.
Who needs them?
Right, and there was a sense in the whole steroid business then and now that what you were reading in the paper, what you were thinking, there was a huge disconnect between what everybody was thinking, what everybody was reading in the newspaper.
Yeah.
I mean,
you made a point. You made a point earlier about the local columnist.
Right.
And I think that's really the strength. I mean, there are some national columnists that I read, but they have real local roots. Jason Whitlock in Kansas City, Brian Burwell in St. Louis. I like Dave Zirin, who's now the Nation's sports correspondent, and Sally Jenkins in Washington, D.C.
Sure.
But, I mean, they also kind of go back and forth between, a real root in their community and a kind of national outlook. But the problem is, you've got these podunk sports columnists, some guy who should be really telling us what's going on in high school sports in Topeka suburbs, who feels that they have to inveigh against Barry Bonds and why they're so very glad that no team has bought him yet. Who cares?
Well, this is a good point, because I do think the ESPN universe has really changed the nature of what the columnist thinks he needs to be doing. And not only in kind of giving us this national sports conversation, where, as you say, someone in Topeka or in with all due respect to Topeka or Fort Worth, Texas, thinks that they have to write multiple columns about Barry Bonds, to actually taking the talent from these local papers and putting them on ESPN every day and turning them into kind of TV chuckleheads. As this column points out, where they, what works on ESPN, the sort of sarcasm, the sort of bombast, the sort of argument, doesn't necessarily, is not a skill that, well developed, will necessarily serve you all that well in your sports column. And so I do sort of think there's a direct causal link between one and the other. The other idea I wanted to sort of float by you was this notion that I actually think, when I look around the country, I think the kind of sports columnist you're describing, where you go out to the game, you get the facts from Barry Bonds or Jeff Kent or whomever, and then you come back and write it down in the paper with your observations. That is one level of it. But I also think that the nature of sports fandom has really changed here in the last couple years. And while those columns are certainly still valuable, there is this whole other way that people are experiencing sports now that is not necessarily as well served by that kind of writing. And to tell you what I mean by that, I mean like fantasy sports, for instance, which almost never get mentioned in local newspapers, at least the ones that I read, or these sports video games. I mean, the thing about it, Bob, is that, in the old days, if the Red Sox traded away Manny Ramirez, you needed that sports columnist. You had this sort of feeling of powerlessness, right? Your favorite team traded away the great player for a bag of magic beans, and you needed the columnist to stand up for you. Okay. So sorry, before we got cut off, Bob, the point I was making is that I think, for a long time, the local sports columnists really sort of served this particular need in the fan, which was someone to stand up to the team and to the leagues and to sort of dignify this feeling of powerlessness that sports fans had. And what I sort of think has happened in the last couple of years is that sports fans have gotten this new kind of empowerment, that the nature of sports fandom has really changed with fantasy sports, football and baseball, and the sports video games and all these other things, because what they've actually done has allowed you to sort of bypass all the conventional annoyances of sports and to kind of and exert a lot more control. And so where 20 years ago Manny Ramirez is traded, you're looking to the Boston papers for this squeal of outrage or this sort of opinion. My sense is that sports fans, especially the youngish ones these days, just don't really need that itch scratched as much as they want. They still want insight, they still want reporting, they still want news and that kind of thing, but for that sort of booming, thundering, Lupica, Dick Young, those guys to sort of stand up and shake their fist at the teams, I don't get the sense anyway, in my own personal opinion, that they really want that anymore.
Right, and also they're of more and more they're of the industry, and as about all those platforms that you talk about, when you go from your radio show to ESPN sports reporters to maybe having some time to write a column now and then. I mean, Stephen Smith got so big that Philadelphia had to dump him the paper because he was spending all his time in his radio program and ESPN, as well he should have.
Right.
And so when you're part of the industry the way these guys do become, how can you shake your fist in any kind of honest way if you're also kind of wiggling your finger on ESPN, which owns everything you're shaking a fist at? Right. Challenging some of the essential premises of the leagues is pretty much impossible under that. Yeah. So where do you see yourself in all of this, Bryan?
I mean, I don't know. I write so infrequely for play because of the publication schedule of play that I don't see myself really. I mean, I'm lovingly, as I'm as much a part of the New York Times as they're happy to have me, but I don't inhabit the paper on a daily or weekly basis, so I don't actually feel terribly part of the news cycle. I feel like I'm sort of happily sort of jumping in a couple of times a year and sort of writing longer and sort of more essayistically and then popping out, And I do, but I don't. Not having a TV gig on ESPN or on ESPN Radio, just you and me on Blogging Heads. I feel happy to shake my fist in whenever I want. Yeah, but the question is, it's interesting that we spend a lot of our time shaking our fists at the media. Right. And I think we're quite right to do this, of course. But I think that what it is also is the way that the media has become so much more a part of the industry than it ever has before. They are now and yet just at a time when they should really be the most adversarial. Right. Well, yeah. I mean, and I think when you talk about getting into bed with television properties that have lots, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars invested in the success and ratings of various sports leagues, that's when that's when the potential that line's crossed. I don't know about the Times or local newspapers should seemingly be free of most of those obligations, right? It's the individual writer who is then getting the commitments, right? Yeah. And there's no reason a newspaper writer in to pick a city, Dallas or whatever should feel at all, worried about shaking his fist at the Cowboys, though, as this article points out, there is always the chance that the Cowboys say, look, we're just going to give you the news through our website and we're going to cut this guy's, credentials off, or we're only going to let him in the locker room one time a week so that he can't really do the reporting that he needs to do. Right. Stuff like that. I guess that does loom over the heads right now. Yeah, I was thinking about this because I have trouble seeing this totally black and white because I remember in 1988,
I was a correspondent for NBC News, and had been hired to be the sports correspondent for NBC News, and I was not attached to NBC Sports at all. NBC had the Olympics that year, and my mandate was to cover anything that I wanted, in news that had to do with sports. And what I found out very quickly was that I could go anywhere in the world, make it up, Nicaragua for the start of the baseball season, no kidding. As long as there was some connection to what NBC Sports had to cover. So in the build-up to the Olympic Games, I could go anywhere,
Sure.
I heard that little Costa Rica, had a 6-foot blonde woman swimmer, little brown Costa Rica. So I could go down there and interview her. The wallet was open that way. But when I wanted to do this 5-part series, and I was willing to do it in one part if they would let me, on drugs in sports, I was told that the people that we fly over, and they actually use that expression, that the people that we fly over are not interested in such things. And I was kind of aflame. I left soon after the Olympics. I was kind of aflame because, just looking at, FloJo's body over the years, I thought that a good case could be made for, chemical enhancement in sports. They would have nothing of it. And so it wasn't until in the middle of the Olympics, 3 o'clock in the morning we got woken up that, Ben Johnson was dirty, that we could get something about drugs on the air.
Right.
So
he had to
the
fail.
reason why I'm thinking about this
test.
is not only the Olympics coming up again right now, but the idea that as kind of self-righteous, a jerk as I am about shaking my finger and whatever at things, that there are so many ways that you can be deflected and co-opted and just kind of not get your stuff on the air.
Right.
And I left sports soon after that. I went to a nightly PBS public affairs show, and I didn't come back to sports for some years after that. But it still rankles that that experience at NBC, and I still understand that it's got to be like that, on and on and on. Whether it's a small matter of the agenda of a executive editor, like the whole Masters thing with Howell Raines at the New York Times, or whether it's something as basically systemic as NBC, protecting its franchise. I think it's really very hard to be a sports journalist now, to be a sports journalist and to think of yourself, those two terms are not oxymoronic, that you really are a journalist. And the guys who do it, and there are a number who really do, are really admirable. That's why I like your stuff. But I think that maybe once you get too regular, bad things are going to happen. We'll have to beat you up too.
So I should continue to write only quarterly. That's what you're recommending, just to stay out of all the jet stream here of hype and publicity and rights fees.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. And I actually just want to add one more note for NBC, and this is a good segue to the Olympics. But since you left the networks have started to, their financial position is much shakier than it was. Rights fees have quadrupled conservatively since then for the Olympics, for other sports, and I can only imagine the situation now is much, much, much more difficult than it was then, I would think. But let's move on to Beijing, shall we?
Well, actually, I've been going back and forth there quite a bit the last few years, and I'm very happy to be in New York right now. I mean,
well, let us talk about Beijing from New York.
The weather, the air quality, the frantic pace. It's kind of amazing. Yeah, the thing with the Olympics being in Beijing now, the focus seems to have been on China as kind of this evil empire that needs to reform, when it really should be on the Olympics, which is a true, evil nation state. And,
please
there are not
explain,
that many
please.
really powerful nation states right now. I mean, the Red Cross, the Catholic Church. I mean, there are very few, and certainly not with the combination of power and influence of the Olympics. I think that Beijing was picked, not to give the Chinese a chance to, prove themselves on a world stage. It was a chance for all the Olympic sponsors to, fulfill this dream of, wow, we can sell one can of Coke, one cell phone, to every 10th Chinese. It will have a really good quarter.
Absolutely. I don't think there's anything conspiratorial about that. I guess my question about the Olympics is it, and you covered the Olympics, you were at the 68 Olympics, am I right there?
Actually, the first that I covered was 1000 BC, in which, as you will recall, a Greek king offered his kingdom and his daughter to anybody who could beat him in a chariot race.
Right.
And the night before the race, some young guy or his agent, I can't tell you too much because it's still confidential. I'm saving it for my memoirs, which I've just signed with Echo Books. He loosened the wheels of the chariot. The king was killed during the race, and he took over the kingdom and the chick. And to commemorate this event, he created games, which eventually became the Olympic Games. And I love this story, even if it's not true, because sex, murder, greed, everything that we've come to love about the Olympics now was there at the creation.
Right. Well, we'll start wherever you want, from 1000 BC or from the more recent games. But has it become if it's an evil nation state, has it become more evil more recently? Or is it
I think
a steady source of evil?
I think it's become more evil because it's become more entrenched. Although on the other hand, it's really had a long history of dealing in friendly terms with fascist and communist governments,
of course,
and the worst kind of corporatos. So I think in a sense nothing has really changed. Bryan, you're going to have to shoot me to stop me, but the last thing I'm going to say the next to last thing I'm going to say is this. I think that we keep making this mistake of looking at the Olympics in, blogging heads, TV, we're so smart, geopolitical terms.
Okay.
What it is soft porn. If you think that athletes are basically sex workers, and that the way to watch the Olympic Games, I will be concentrating on beach volleyball, girls gymnastics, stuff like
Swimming
that.
And
I make no
diving,
secret. I make no secret of this, and I think that the most, some of the most beautiful bodies in the world, in the highest levels of performance, going to the utmost of their physical, emotional, and mental skills, is a thrilling pleasure of the flesh.
Right.
So anything else, seems irrelevant to me.
Well, maybe sort of stopping short of calling Dara Torres and Michael Phelps sex workers. I do at least endorse that with
this is your disclaimer because you're from the New York Times?
No. I mean, I just to make it more to sort of narrow it down just a bit. The women's gymnastics, I think certainly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't it all about just titillation? I mean, isn't it with John Tesh on the call? I don't know if he's doing it this year again, but he traditionally has been this kind of sort of a cross between between somebody who's doing a kind of runway show and then sort of a stage dad so standing off, screaming and squealing about his daughter, right? Year after year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just unbelievable to watch that. But I agree. But your point is that we can tune in the Olympics to admire these beautiful bodies at the height of their athleticism, and there's not that there's anything wrong with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is not part of the evil Olympics, right? This is part of the wonders of sports, right? That we can see, see beautiful, well-muscled, fast people, running around and diving and jumping and doing those kinds of things, and appreciate the beauty of the form, right? Isn't that the pure essence of sports?
And I mean, I think in return for this kind of gorgeous spectacle, if Tibet has to be oppressed, or if Nike has to have sweatshops, hey,
dissidents rounded up,
yeah, if Darfur, the genocide has to continue, I think it's all part of my carbon footprint.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of think I do appreciate the fact that the Olympics, that it does get, I don't think there's, I do think it's nice that Americans can sit down and watch swimming, right, for the first and only time they'll do it in 4 years. They can watch. There is something wonderful about watching Michael Phelps that no one is going to get to do for a long while after this. The basketball teams to me seems like kind of a joke, and kind of going through the motions. But I like a lot of it, and I like a lot of the bodies I see out there. Other than I don't know. I guess over the years I've become sort of just totally when you talk about terms of geopolitical terms, I've just become so just kind of bowled over by the kind of strange and hypocrisy and, as you say, sort of sponsor-driven site locations that I've just become immune to the whole thing. Is that a bad place to be?
No.
I wake myself up, or
no. I understand that, and I think that part of the problem is certainly in your lifetime, probably when you started your awareness as a sports fan, the Olympics still was some sort of crucible of honesty, of integrity, of amateurism, of a kind of nationalism that was a soft alternative to war, which seemed valuable. I mean, all these things really seem useful and good things. But, in your time, you have seen it change into something as commercially spectacular as the Super Bowl or the World Series or the World Cup or anything else. So it has kind of lost that specialness to you, right?
That's right. And I can only, my sort of general view of the Olympics is just kind of, resigned skepticism.
Right. So in a sense, that's unfortunate that what it's left you is that skepticism or even merging on cynicism, perhaps.
Yes.
Because it is still as a festival, on the one hand, as a festival of youth, it's got to be the most gorgeous event of all time. On the other hand, to know that Speedo will give Michael Phelps, $1 million if he actually gets 8 gold medals.
He breaks Mark's business.
You say, holy mackerel, what's this about? And then the realization that a couple of weeks from now, we will probably look upon Michael Phelps as one of the great losers of all time because he only got 6 or 7 gold medals.
Right. Right.
And that's going to happen. And all that wonderful talk about his floppy foot, that wonderful ability to have a straight line from his knee to his toe. We're going to say, wow, he kind of went too far in the other direction. We'll find some reason why. And then Ian Crocker, who stole a couple of his gold medals. So
that's right.
We're kind of creating these narratives which will in some way, satisfy our skepticism up the road.
No, I think that's right, and I just wish they have all these new Olympics telecasts, right? And maybe this is actually available on the computer, and I just haven't checked it, but where you can just kind of skip right past all the NBC narratives and storytelling and expectations building and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And just go straight to sort of from minimum context. Here's Michael Phelps. He was trying to win gold medal number 2. Straight to the race. I mean, don't you
I think
that
you
would
could do
just
that
cure
a lot of
our
that
ills?
online. I think can't you get straight feeds?
Well, let's do it. In 4 days from now, let's do it. That would unfortunately involve skipping the entire opening ceremonies, I think. But otherwise, I think we can get some serious sports programming in there.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
When Roone Arledge was running ABC, I once asked him. I once asked him how. The opening ceremony is really fun to watch. It's really nice to watch. Not only the excitement of the ceremony, but I love to watch the athletes coming in. But there are commercials, and then you lose countries during commercials. and I once asked him, how do you make those kind of choices? And he said something very flip about, goodbye, Chile. And I was thinking, maybe that's, there are just kind of so many wonderful little Olympic metaphors that kind of feed into, your growing skepticism. And
yes. Kicked out of the community of nations for Procter and Gamble.
But I mean, nothing has really
Olympic
changed.
Way.
The day before the Mexico City Olympics opened in '68, one of the tour guides took me to the plaza, where she said that the 200 or more students had been massacred, and there were still these brown spots on the cobblestones, which she said were blood. But it hadn't been in the New York Times, so I didn't really know about it. And it was years before we all found out about it. So, I mean, this goes so far back, this horrible cleansing. And now we're focusing on China,
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't even want to try to make comparisons between which cleansing is worse and not. I mean, we could probably guess, but it's horrifying to even contemplate. From Olympic heroes to football heroes, football in the American sense heroes. Brett Favre has returned, like this kind of, sort of stretched his legs and cracked his knuckles and come out of his Mississippi retirement. This story is just unbelievably to me. I mean, there are purple prose sports writers who are just crying themselves to sleep every night that this is happening in front of them. But Brett Favre retired in March, had a teary farewell from the Packers, and then he decided a couple months later that he wanted to come back to the league, or was at least thinking about it. He began this sort of strange dance of text messaging and calling various people in the media, people in the Packers, people in the league. And now he's back. He arrives, as we record this, he arrived yesterday in Green Bay and was reinstated by Roger Goodell. So why do you think, I guess my question to you to start off our discussion is, why do you think Brett in particular occupies such a place in all of our hearts, especially all of our sports writerly hearts?
Well, I'm happy he's back. Are you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy if he's happy.
Yeah, Yeah,
I want him to do whatever he wants.
I want Brett to be happy. In a world, in a cardboard, this cardboard world of Derek Jeter and Roger Federer and Tiger Woods. Marvelous athletes, all of whom I know really nothing about any of them.
No, nor will you ever.
None of us know anything about them. They could be, if they were fictional characters, the book reviewers would, say you haven't created a live person here. And here is this guy who, cries and sweats and cares and screams and, is indecisive.
Took painkillers.
And obviously really misses he misses sports writers. I mean, he really misses hanging out with the team.
He misses Peter King. No, he does miss it.
Yeah,
he does miss it.
And so I'm really happy. But what you bring up is so interesting. The way that so many sports writers, we started all this talking about the role of the sports columnist. The way they fulminated about his refusal to get out of the way.
Right.
And I wonder how much of that is they had finished the narrative and were now afraid that he would come back and embarrass their memory of him.
Exactly. I mean, we saw the same thing with Michael Jordan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got one for you here. I brought a special prop here. This is Sports Illustrated, December 2006. I'm quoting, "There will come a time when Brett Favre can no longer play. this is not the time, but at the end of the season, or the next one, or the next, or the next, he will step away at last, having earned the peace of an endless off-season. Doesn't sound like Brett's going to die, but go ahead. Anyway, continuing. The cold and the snow will overtake Green Bay, and the stadium at the edge of the world will stand empty behind us. The last thing we see in the rearview mirror as we cross that river, the light at last failing in the trees. This is actually from Sports Illustrated. It's not a parody. But don't you think that when you write that, and then Brett inconveniently comes out of retirement, oh no, it ruined my beautiful sentence, right?
Yeah, that's wonderful. I remember the end of The Gladiator with Russell Crowe.
Right, with the snow falling on the plane and all that?
He's dying, but he's in the wheat fields now again, and his dead wife and child are coming to greet him.
Yeah, right. Imagine if Brett had actually died. Imagine what would have been written. That was just retired. That was in 2006. He wasn't even crying yet. But I think you're absolutely right. I think again, not to talk too much about our fellow sports writers, but I think they do have this sort of a very, very invested narrative. And the narrative was that Brett put together one great season, and then he really went home and he realized his abilities had faded just a little bit because he was a good quarterback last year, but he wanted to get out of the way and give the young kid a chance and let Green Bay.
I remember when his father died.
Whatever glorious future awaits him, but
I remember when his dad died. Remember, we knew how close a relationship he had with his dad.
Sure.
When his dad died, right afterward, he had the best game of all time, and it was the kind of the marvelous, because of an insight into the marvelous focus, of this kind of elite athlete, who was always able to kind of block out, the noise in the stands and what was going on, anything, emotionally extraneous to the game. But here, when this really awful thing happened, he was able to focus even tighter. And he was really able to concentrate, on an incredible level. And it really showed you, what this game means to these guys. And the idea of stepping out of it when he still could play seemed crazy. But the flip side of him is that other guy that you and I are so interested in, Alex Rodriguez.
Right.
The guy who can't step up as Brett can.
Yes.
I think there's something horribly ironic about his nickname, A-Rod, and his whole business with Madonna and the Kabbalah, I think, is the most encouraging thing, because this is a guy who, basically, at the most important moment, can't step up, can't get it up, can't do this thing. And I think that if he could have an older woman with a real who's been there and really has a spiritual background, there's a chance for him to become what he really should be, which is the greatest player in the game.
Wow.
What do you think?
You're seeing it direct. Well, I would just, if he just gave an interesting or revealing interview, I would think that would be a first step, don't you think? I would actually dispute this characterization, Bob, because let us review Madonna's previous athletic paramours. Dennis Rodman, who needed no such real. I guess he was fully realized by the time she got to him, and then Jose Canseco.
Yeah, but
now,
she hadn't had the opportunity to really help a truly needy person. Dennis Rodman, we can say might have been even too much for her. He was, if not mentally ill, he played one on television.
Well, he seemingly could have used Madonna's focus, though, right?
Right.
He was a little bit all over the place. His identity was kind of literally pinballing around in front of our eyes. Jose, on the other hand, unless you want to draw a link between his later literary efforts and his brief moments with Madonna, then I don't know that helped. But maybe with A-Rod, maybe she possesses the self-confidence. Are you seeing in Madonna the kind of self-confidence? Or are you seeing the kind of focus through the religious kind of focus that A-Rod needs to attain?
Well, obviously he's a seeker of some kind. I think that the sense of weakness that the sports media has always found in him
Right.
I find one of the most attractive parts of him. I mean, he's a guy who is still trying to find his way. He doesn't have this kind of brain-dead confidence that Derek Jeter has.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I mean,
No, that's true.
Alex is really trying to figure it out, which is very appealing. But I mean, that's the flip side of his lack of confidence. So maybe here's somebody. I mean, she's been on the highest level of celebrity, under the highest levels of pressure. She's older. She can function as that older sexual woman that we all have fantasized about, or at least I can speak for myself.
Okay.
And here is that kind of next, wonderful step for him. I'm very excited about the possibility that come October we'll see the Madonna effect.
Oh, the Madonna, the postseason Madonna effect.
Yes. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I just want to ask you one thing about A-Rod. I mean, I guess with A-Rod, I don't know that I've always seen him as a seeker so much as somebody who's sought and has found nothing. I mean, that I didn't know that. Yeah. I mean, you're imputing a lot of sort of really interesting characteristics into his personality. I always just found that he just was kind of a baseball player, and that didn't really have any. I didn't see a sort of restless mind lurking beneath those huge shades that he wears out on third base. Yeah. I always thought he was just, but again, perhaps if that's the case too, then Madonna, by offering this sort of glimpse into this kind of, restless, sexy aesthetic, will sort of wake him up.
Well, maybe this is just another case of your older skeptical wisdom. And,
prevailing,
and my youthful,
my steady hand,
my projection,
yes, well,
right?
Well, I've seen a lot of athlete paramours, Bob, over my time, and let me tell you, they don't all work out like you want them to. Don't worry, young'un, you'll know one of these days. Well, should we leave it with A-Rod and come back in the fall sometime when we have football, America's true national pastime? To talk about it in some depth.
Right. I mean, I know that college football is probably too hypocritical for you.
It's so hypocritical that I've fully embraced it. As a proud University of Texas graduate, I close my eyes and wrap my arms around it like a close relative. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's something to be said for self-declared evil.
Yes, I think if I can pick one part of American life, I'm college football. I'll defend it to the death.
But when we reconvene, we'll have football, and we'll have the baseball postseason.
Yes, with possibly A-Rod and Madonna. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be on our way towards. Are you in a fantasy football league, by the way?
Yes, I am.
Well, I'm not, and we'll have to talk about that because I think that's a major glitch in your character.
Okay, I like that. The ethics of fantasy football, and I'm sure we'll have some more picky complaints about the state of our sports pages too. What do you want to bet?
Okay.
All right.
Well, have a great Olympics.
Thank you, sir.
Enjoy it a lot, and I wish that I could reveal to you the channel for which I've paid a lot of money, in which I will see the games in their original naked state.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a camera, which it's a Homeland Security camera, actually, in which I can see all the athletes without their clothes on.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh.
I can't wait.
I'll see you around 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon.
Okay. Bye.
See you, Bob.